YouTube, GK is back with another Final Fantasy 16 video. As you can see, I am really hyped about Final Fantasy 16. We're gonna be getting news soon, and in preparation for that, I've been making more content on it. And it is my full belief that Final Fantasy 16 is a love letter to Final Fantasy 15. I've got a few reasons why based on the trailer and the news from the official website. Kind of compiled some of my thoughts showing the similarities between the two titles. I expect 16 to build upon the mechanics, the story, everything 15 did, but in a more committed way without the development problems. And I think we're gonna get the Final Fantasy we all really deserved with 15. I personally really liked 15, but I know there were issues with it. I can't wait to see what they tried to do expanded upon in 16. So I do hope you enjoy the video. If you do, please leave a like, as that lets me know that y'all want to see more Final Fantasy 16 content. I do have a playlist if you're a little confused on the information I will be talking about, but those videos aren't necessary to understand that FF16 is a love letter to Final Fantasy 15.
Yo, it's the Grown Kid Talk Show.
So first up is the time skip, or time skipping, or some kind of time jumping. In Final Fantasy 15, we had Noctis as a young adult and then a 10-year time jump. In the trailer for 16, we had Clive in what I'm going to say is another 10-year time jump. I know that the time jump in 15 wasn't exactly expanded upon too great, but it did shift the world dynamics and gave a whole new look and vibe. I really liked the take of the older characters, and I do like this time jump. I'm expecting fully in Final Fantasy 16 for this to be more central to the plot. We're gonna see Clive go through a lot more than Noctis did. Remember, Noctis was just asleep and the rest of the world kept going, and the DLC Comrades took place in that time, which Comrades is fantastic. Definitely check it out if you haven't. But I think we're gonna get way more character focus in that time jump with Final Fantasy 16, and I couldn't be happier for that, because I do think it was a little bit of a missed opportunity, but I can see why we needed more, and FF16 I think is going to provide that. Continuing on the trend, meaningful summons, and this is a loaded topic I found. We have Gentiana, a messenger. Same kind of thing with Dominance. Joshua, they're serving the same kind of role. They're envoys or voices of these summons. I like when the summons are personified and they're not creature captures or Pokemon. I like when they're real and tangible. The Ifrit story in 15, we have the Phoenix story, and then the Ifrit story somewhat kind of, I don't really know what's going on there, but that's coming back in 16. A lot of hardcore fans didn't really like 15, but the fact is that the summons were real, godly. You couldn't just control them, you couldn't just summon them. They were out of this world, and I like my summons that way. We've already seen that with the trailers. The summons are at war with each other, the same way that the summons were at war with each other in 15. Maybe Ifrit in 16 is coming to take his role as the fire icon in that world. I really like meaningful summons, and I can't wait to meet all of the new messengers, or Dominants as they're called in Final Fantasy 16, because 15 didn't really have enough of them. I wanted more Gentianas, and I think 16 is going to do that. If you haven't seen the Final Fantasy 16 video, full map filled in, I did, go check that out, but it's gonna be open world map. I think 15 is the closest we've gotten to open world gameplay in Final Fantasy as a franchise. Remember, open world gameplay is a lot different than open world mechanics. Final Fantasy has never been open world in the sense that a Skyrim has, where the choices you make matter in terms of character decision making, like a Cyberpunk 2077. And I think that's a good thing for Final Fantasy, because it's able to tell great stories while pulling out some of the better aspects of open world gameplay. Granted, some of the map was empty in Final Fantasy 15. That was their real first dive into this kind of mechanic for the genre, and I think it's only going to get better and be better in Final Fantasy 16, even though people don't consider Final Fantasy 15 to be really kings and lords and peasants type of feel. It was, And one of the aspects that I noticed, the father-son relationships. So we do know that Clive and Joshua are the sons of the Archduke of Rosaria. You could think of it like Rosaria is the kingdom of Lucis, where Regis was the king and his son was Noctis. So we have the eldest sons going on a journey. That dynamic of father and son relationship, I think, is going to be a little bit more prevalent in 16, given that Regis was killed, this father who knew what his son was going to have to go through. It's the same thing with the Archduke of Rosaria. He knows what his son has to go through, even though Clive wasn't picked as the Phoenix's icon. The Phoenix chose Joshua, the younger brother, instead. So we're going to get the father-son relationships again, as well as those fathers being kings and lords of their specific kingdom. With 16, it's going to be even more expanded because we're going to have more kings and queens and lords all across the map. If you've been keeping up with some of the videos I've made, people really want a large party. I'm kind of against the large party when it comes down to character development. Final Fantasy 15 had some of the best character development I've seen from the franchise. I like a smaller, more intimate cast, and if anything, Final Fantasy 16 right now has shown that it's really only going to be one main character. It won't be your huge 15-person party where you're cycling through battle mages. It won't be your cast of 8 with like a side character you can or can't get, where 2 of them are really just useless characters you'll never use in your party. I think we're kind of done with that for 16 at least, and I'm glad. I want the small, focused cast, and by all accounts, the trailer hints at that will be true. Intense combat, I'm gonna explain this a little bit. It's to denote the idea that every battle is gonna kind of feel more important. Yes, the mechanics of 15 might have made that feel easier or harder to some. I, for one, think there was a high skill ceiling into being good at the combat and making it look good with that dodge that Noctis does with the square. But you could, if you were bad at the action type combat, just pop 100 potions and get through it. With the harder content in the game, especially comrades, you wouldn't be able to do that. With 16, it looks like they're taking that up even more, where it's just Clive fighting one Marlboro by himself in that trailer, and it's going to be action combat. There's no doubt about it. I don't think it's going to be some ATB bullshit. I think it's going to be full in on the action-based combat, and when you're fighting these classic Final Fantasy enemies and hopefully some new ones, it's going to feel intense because it's just you up against this threat. Very zoomed in, very quick, and I think there will be another high ceiling to reach in 16's combat mechanically or technically, which I'm really excited to get good at and master, just like I did in Final Fantasy 15. One of the more noticeable moments, our main character Clive has a shadow step, which is very similar to Noctis's dash that was in 15. It's going to function almost identical. Obviously, there will be some changes, but the comparison between the two cannot be confused. That is a signature of Noctis's combat that differentiated him from all the other main characters of a Final Fantasy game. They all have their move, and that was Noctis's. And to see Clive have it is just another reason as to why I think 16 will be a love letter to 15. Crystal Focus is the next one. These last 2 installments were Crystal Focus. Now, a lot of Final Fantasies are Crystal Focused, but I do think that the Crystal Focus in 15 was going to be a lot stronger than it ended up being. However, in 16, I think the Crystal Focus is going to be taken to another level, because we do know, as from the map filled in the video I made, that there are crystals scattered around and they all kind of form this drake or this dragon. I think the crystals are going to play a more overtly obvious part of Final Fantasy 16 story. They played a huge part in Final Fantasy 15 story, where Noctis goes to sleep. Obviously, King Regis, they're protecting that crystal from the Imperial Army. But I think in 16, the crystal is used by everybody for the blessing, and I like the idea of crystals in Final Fantasy, so I cannot wait for that like classic Final Fantasy crystal type of thing. Playing off the crystals a little bit, there is a blight and a sickness. Obviously, you see the picture of art in there, but when you read the little bio on the website for the land of Valencia, we know that there is a blight, they call it, spreading across the land. Again, another little nod to Final Fantasy 15. I'm really excited about the blight because With Luna Freya, it wasn't so overtly in your face. FF15 was a drama and a play. I think there will be aspects of that in 16, but I think 16 is going to return to more like a video game in the traditional sense of what fans kind of expect. I think the Blight is going to be more like a plague of Middle Earth. That's a different take on 15's Blight. The Scar Scourge in 15 was a big deal. We saw Ifrit succumb to it, Arden succumb to it. It's just another reason why I think this is a love letter. So that was really it from what I got initially on a surface level. I didn't really do a deep dive into this. I may want to, depending on if you guys really want to see that. So let me know what you think, if I missed any super obvious that I couldn't really understand, or do you want me to talk more about certain parts? But I've said this and I'll continue to say this. Everybody has their own favorite Final Fantasy for their own specific reasons that they want to see redone, remastered, or more games in that style. What I want to say is, let's try to make Final Fantasy 16 our new favorite. I know I talk a lot. I might have, well, did I ramble? I actually felt like I was moving pretty quick. I didn't rant because Final Fantasy 16 is going to be awesome. I'm the Grown Kid, and I catch you back in another video.
You're on to something special.